The aroma of fresh coffee filled the air and enveloped me like a cozy embrace. The cafe, one of my favorite spots in Chicago, was busier than usual that chilly autumn morning. I sat at a table near the window, the soft sunlight filtering through the golden leaves falling from the trees outside. With a steaming cup of cappuccino in hand, I let myself be carried away by the nostalgic atmosphere surrounding me. As I watched the hustle and bustle of people, a familiar song began to play in the background. It was one of those songs you haven't heard in years, but when you hear it again, it triggers an avalanche of memories. The gentle melody and romantic lyrics immediately transported me to a distant past. To my first love, Jake. Our smiles, our conversations, and especially the moments when we danced together in his living room, while the world outside seemed to fade away. Hi, Clara. You haven't forgotten me, right? The cheerful voice of Sarah, my longtime friend, interrupted my whirlwind of thoughts. She sat down across from me, tossing her brown hair and smiling widely. Of course not, Sarah. How could I? I replied, trying to mask the melancholy that was starting to settle in my chest. You have that thoughtful look on your face again. What's going on? She tilted her head, her expression shifting from playful to concerned. Just some old memories, you know. This song, I pointed upwards, as if the radio were right in front of me. It made me think of Jake. Oh, Jake, the one you fell in love with in school? What's he up to now? Sarah asked, her gaze curious and playful, but I noticed a touch of empathy in her voice. I don't know. I think he still lives here in Chicago, but it's been years since I've seen him. It's funny how a song can take us back in time, isn't it? I replied, looking out the window where the leaves danced in the wind. Yes, it is. Music has that power, but you shouldn't get caught up in nostalgia. What's done is done, Clara, she said, her tone trying to be encouraging. Yeah, I know, but sometimes it feels like things haven't changed that much. What I feel is still real. I just don't know how to move on. I confessed, feeling my vulnerability increase. Hi, sorry to interrupt, but do you have a minute? A waiter approached, holding a tray with some drinks. He had a friendly smile and an attentive look. Sure, what do you need? I asked, trying to divert attention from the delicate subject we were discussing. I just wanted to know if you'd like to try a new coffee we're serving. It's a special autumn blend with spices and a hint of caramel. He explained, gesturing enthusiastically. That sounds great. I love coffee with spices. I replied, excited by the idea. Awesome. I'll bring one for you. And he walked away, leaving the table with a positive energy. You and your love for coffee. That never changes. Sarah laughed, breaking the tension that had formed between us. But back to Jake. Have you thought about looking him up? Look him up? I don't know, Sarah. What would I say? Hey, Jake, how's it going? Remember me? The girl you loved 10 years ago. I laughed, but the idea made me uneasy. Why not? Sometimes it's good to revisit the past. It can be freeing, she said, with a look that seemed to encourage me to move forward. Freeing or painful? I'm not sure I'm ready for that. I replied as the waiter returned with my new drink. Here you go, an autumn coffee, as promised. Hope you enjoy it, he said, placing the cup on the table. Thank you. I'm excited to try it. I smiled at him, feeling a wave of gratitude for that small gesture. I hope you like it. If you need anything else, I'll be around. And he walked away, leaving me again with Sarah. I think you should do it, Clara. At least you'll know where your mind and heart stand. Maybe you're right, but what if he doesn't remember me? What if it's all just an illusion I've created in my head? I asked, insecurity showing in my voice. Just trying to find out if you still love someone who's not in your life. Sometimes you need to look back to move forward. And if he doesn't remember you, at least you'll have tried," Sarah said with conviction. I looked at her, admiring her confidence. It was true that the idea of reaching out to Jake made me nervous, but at the same time, there was a spark of curiosity beginning to shine within me. "I'll think about it," I replied, determined not to let fear paralyze me. As I took a sip of the coffee, the sweet and warm flavor spread through my mouth, bringing a sense of comfort that made me smile. For a moment, I set aside the memories of Jake and focused on savoring that simple, precious moment. "Look, Clara, I don't want to be a downer here, but you really should consider this. It's not healthy to be stuck in the past. You deserve to be happy, even if that means revisiting some old pains. You know how to make me feel better, don't you? But what if what I discover isn't what I want to hear?" I asked with a slight smile. "Either way, you'll learn something about yourself. And that's the most important thing. I'll be by your side. Don't worry," she said with a determined look. "Thank you, Sarah. I really need you," I replied. And at that moment, I realized that despite the emotional weight the past brought me, I wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to open the doors of the past and see what was really there. The aroma of fresh coffee still lingered in the air as I walked through the streets of Chicago, the afternoon sun filtering between the skyscrapers and casting long, subtle shadows on the pavement. Each step I took seemed to echo in a distant past, as if the sidewalks were filled with memories. The song that had played in the cafe continued to play in my mind like a tape that wouldn't stop repeating. It was amazing how a single chord could evoke feelings I thought I had buried. I decided I needed to visit some of our favorite spots. The first was the park where we used to spend our afternoons. As I approached, the sounds of children laughing and birds singing enveloped me. I sat on a bench under the shade of a tall tree, and the gentle breeze brushed my face, bringing forth the image of Jake. I clearly remembered how he used to wear that blue cap, which gave him a carefree look, and how he always made me laugh with his silly jokes. "Clara, have you ever imagined living in a place like this? One day, I'm going to have a house right here, with a garden full of flowers," he once said, looking up at the sky, his eyes shining with hope. "You and your fantasies, Jake. How are you going to take care of a garden if you can barely look after your carnivorous plant?" I joked, remembering how he had let the poor plant wilt to death, but he just laughed, as if it didn't matter. I closed my eyes and let the memory wash over me. His laughter still echoed in my mind, and for a moment, everything felt so vivid. I could almost feel the energy of that time, but the feeling of nostalgia quickly gave way to a pang of pain. It was as if I were caught between what was and what could have been. I got up from the bench and decided I needed to move on, so I headed toward the cafe where we used to meet. The place still had that cozy charm, with its exposed brick walls and hanging lights creating an intimate atmosphere. As I walked in, the clinking of cups and the murmur of conversations wrapped around me. But at the same time, a sense of loneliness hit me. The barista, a young man with a friendly smile, greeted me. "Hi, what can I get for you today?" he asked while preparing a latte. "A cappuccino, please. And if it's not too much trouble, could you point me to a quiet place to sit?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sure. We have a little table back there by the window. It's pretty quiet," he said, pointing to the corner of the cafe. "Thank you," I responded, feeling a twinge of gratitude. I sat down and looked out the window, watching people rush by, each with their own story, their own loves and heartbreaks. How I wished I could know what each of them was thinking. The cappuccino arrived, and with the first sip, I felt the rich flavor invade my palate. It was comforting, but at the same time, it reminded me of Jake. He always said that a good cup of coffee could fix everything. Just one cup, and everything gets better, he would say, with a mischievous smile. Do you still believe that, Clara? A familiar voice pulled me from my daydream. I looked up and found Lucas, a longtime friend. He had a wide, welcoming smile, and I felt relieved to see him. Hey, Lucas, what a surprise, I said, trying to hide the confusion I felt. Mind if I join you? He asked, already settling into the chair across from me. Of course. How have you been? I asked, trying to change the subject. I'm good, but you seem distant. What's going on? He didn't waste any time in noticing my restlessness. Just memories, I murmured, almost unwillingly. Jake? Lucas asked, and I stared at him, surprised by his intuition. Yes, the song playing in the cafe reminded me of him. I came to visit some places we used to go, I confessed, feeling a weight on my shoulders. That's good, Clara. Sometimes facing the past is necessary, but you can't live in it, you know? Lucas said, his words laden with concern. I know, but it's hard. He was such a big part of my life. Sometimes I wonder if I could have done something differently, if I hadn't left everything behind. I said, my voice catching. Don't blame yourself for what didn't happen. You made your choices. The important thing is that you're here now, and that counts, Lucas asserted, looking into my eyes. There was a sincerity in him that made me feel a little lighter. It's difficult, Lucas. I really thought I had moved past this, but it feels like I just put it in a box and hid it in the back of my heart, I said, feeling tears threaten to slip down my face. Sometimes we need to open those boxes and let the light in. It's not easy, but it's necessary, he replied, and I admired his ability to comfort me. The conversation flowed, and I felt more at ease. Lucas always had a way of making me reflect. He changed the subject, talking about his new girlfriend and the plans they were making. I listened to him, but I was still trapped in my memories. After a while, the cafe began to fill up, and I decided it was time to leave. Thank you for listening, Lucas. I really needed this, I said, getting up from the table. I'm always here for you, Clara. Never forget that, he replied, and I smiled, feeling warmth in my heart. I left the cafe and decided to take another stroll through the park before heading home. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in orange and pink. As I walked, I realized that while the pain of memories of Jake was still present, there was room for hope. And as I looked at the sky, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I could find my way back to myself. Sitting in the cozy cafe, I had the feeling that time had stopped. The aroma of fresh coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the soft sound of the song playing in the background. It was a familiar melody, one of those that takes us back in time, and at that moment I couldn't help it. I closed my eyes and saw Jake beside me, his smile lighting up the space like a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. I remembered how he used to play with his hair, pulling the rebellious strands behind his ear while talking about his dreams and plans. Clara, you have to hear this song. It's perfect for us, he had said once while putting on one of his favorite songs on his old radio. That day, the song seemed to echo in my mind, and I couldn't help but smile nostalgically. I stood up with a burst of determination, resolved to relive some of the most cherished memories I had with Jake. I left the cafe, feeling the fresh Chicago air touch my face. The city pulsed around me, but the only thing I could think about was Jake and the places we used to visit. My first destination was the park, where we spent hours talking under the shade of the trees. The gentle breeze made the leaves dance, and for a moment, I felt wrapped in a cloak of memories. I sat on one of the benches, watching children play and couples walking hand in hand. Everything reminded me of him. Hey, do you still remember our competition to see who could stay silent the longest? I laughed as I recalled that sunny afternoon. Jake had lost, as always, but he never let pride speak louder than his desire to make me smile. Suddenly, I heard a familiar laugh. I turned around, and there he was, Jake, with his carefree demeanor, as if he had never left. My heart raced, and for a brief moment I thought I might be dreaming. "Clara, what are you doing here?" He looked surprised, but his smile was as warm as I remembered. It was as if the entire universe had conspired to bring us back together. "Oh, just revisiting some memories," I replied, trying to sound casual. But the emotion in my voice was undeniable. "Good memories, I hope," he said, sitting down beside me. The scent of his cologne enveloped me, and it felt as if time had returned to what it once was. "Yes, good ones. I remember that time you hid behind a tree to scare me and ended up falling into the lake." I laughed, recalling the day Jake got completely soaked but still had fun like a kid. "You were so embarrassed." "Hey, you were laughing at me too. Don't forget." He smiled, and I realized that smiles still had the power to melt my heart. We talked about the past, and every word seemed to weave an even stronger connection between us. Discussing our dreams, our frustrations, and everything we had been through felt like opening a door I thought was locked. Jake told me about his plans to travel, and I couldn't help the twinge of jealousy that stirred within me. "I've always wanted to see the world, Clara. Remember how we used to dream about it?" He looked into my eyes, and I saw the passion reflected in them. "I do remember, but what if I wanted to go with you?" The question slipped from my lips before I could think it through. What was I saying? The fear of opening up to him again, of reliving everything we had, paralyzed me for a moment. He seemed surprised, but the expression on his face quickly turned into a hopeful smile. "Are you serious? That would be incredible. I always thought you were the only person I'd want to share this with." There was something in the way he spoke that made me believe that maybe, just maybe, we still had a chance. The past had brought us together, and now, who knows, the future might give us that opportunity again. I decided I needed to take a pause, not just to process what was happening, but also to remind myself that things weren't that simple. "Jake, I don't know. Things have changed, and I don't want us to hurt each other again," I said, insecurity showing in my voice. "I understand, Clara, but I'm not the boy who left anymore. I've learned a lot since then, and I feel like we still have so much to live together." He held my hand, and the touch was like an electric shock, bringing forth all the emotions I had kept inside. What if I'm wrong? What if we lose ourselves again? Doubt consumed me, but I didn't want to feel this way. It was time to face my fears. Sometimes life is about taking risks, Clara. I don't want you to feel trapped in the past, if there's still something here. "If there's still us," he said, looking into my eyes with a sincerity that made me want to believe. I took a deep breath, thinking of all the memories, all the laughter and tears we had shared. He was a part of me, and I couldn't just ignore that. Maybe I still have a little hope," I confessed, and the tension between us seemed to dissipate, giving way to a new possibility. "So, what do you think about starting over?" "One step at a time," Jake suggested, his voice soft and encouraging. "One step at a time," I repeated, feeling a wave of optimism. The idea of starting over was scary, but also exciting. What did I really want? Could we be happy again? As we talked, the afternoon turned into evening. The city lights began to shine, reflecting the new hope that was starting to blossom in my heart. The music still echoed in my mind, but now, instead of sadness, it brought a sense of renewal. "I'll always be here, Clara. No matter what happens," Jake said, And those words brought me an unexpected comfort. Life was full of uncertainties, but maybe, just maybe, I could allow myself to dream again. The night stretched out before us, and with it, I realized that the journey was just beginning. A new chapter was about to be written, and I was ready to discover where it would take us. The aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the gentle breeze coming through the cafe window as I settled into one of the corner tables. The song playing in the background made my heart race. It was the same one Jake and I used to listen to, the soundtrack of a summer that felt like it lasted an eternity. I closed my eyes for a moment, allowing the memories to flow within me like a current. When I opened my eyes, the afternoon light filtered through the glass, illuminating the cozy space. The walls were adorned with photos of smiling people, capturing simple moments that seemed full of meaning. A wave of nostalgia washed over me, and I found myself getting up as if an invisible force was pulling me out of my chair. The city of Chicago seemed to be calling me. I walked through the streets I once knew like the back of my hand. Every corner brought a memory, every sidewalk an echo of laughter. I immersed myself in the crowd, but I felt strangely alone, as if I were observing everything from a distance. I arrived at the park where Jake and I used to meet. The sun was shining high, and people were scattered about, some having picnics, others just enjoying the warmth of the day. I sat on a bench under a tree, its leaves dancing softly in the wind. I closed my eyes again and let the memory take me back. It was there that he surprised me with an impromptu picnic, a checkered blanket spread over the green grass, filled with fruits and sandwiches we made together. "Clara, you have to try this strawberry," Jake exclaimed, holding a juicy fruit between his fingers. His laughter was contagious, and I couldn't resist. "Only if you promise not to bite it before me," I replied, laughing. The memory faded, and with it came the realization that those moments were part of something bigger. I looked up at the sky, which seemed as blue as it did that day, and a feeling of longing enveloped me. What would have happened if things had been different? If we hadn't lost sight of each other? If time hadn't separated us? I got up and started walking, my steps guiding me aimlessly. With each step, the idea that I needed to find Jake grew stronger. I decided I would go to where he lived. The address was still etched in my memory, and even though I hadn't seen him in years, hope pulsed within me like a beacon. The walk to his apartment seemed long, but I didn't mind. The city, with its imposing architecture and bustling streets, became the perfect backdrop for my search. Upon arriving in front of the building, I could feel the nervousness take hold of me. What would I say to him? What would he say to me? The questions swirled in my mind as I climbed the stairs. I knocked on the door, my heart racing with each passing second. I stood there, waiting, uncertain. In my mind, I replayed all the moments we had together, all the laughter and tears. Finally, the door opened, and there he was, Jake. The same expression of surprise and joy that I recognized so well. "Clara?" He seemed incredulous, as if he couldn't believe I was really there. "Hi, Jake," I said, my voice trembling slightly. I just wanted to see you." "Come in," he said, opening the door a bit wider. "Are you okay?" Yeah, just a little confused," I replied, trying to find the right words. The interior of the apartment had changed, but the essence was still there. The same photos on the walls, but now with a few new ones. He had moved, but it still felt like a part of us was there. Jake led me to a comfortable sofa, and we sat down. Silence hung in the air for a moment, heavy with unspoken meanings. He broke the ice first. "You're different, but at the same time, the same Clara," he said, a shy smile forming on his lips. You're different too, I said, winking in his direction. But you still have that messy hair that I always loved. He laughed, running a hand through his hair as if trying to tame it. And you still have that way of making me laugh. That's nice. The atmosphere began to warm up, but the tension was still there. I knew we needed to talk about the past, about what separated us. Jake, I've been thinking a lot about us, about what happened. Yeah, me too, he admitted, looking down. It was hard, after you moved, I felt lost. I didn't know how to move on. Me too, I said, my voice faltering. But I never stopped thinking about you. You were my first love, and that never goes away, right? He looked up, and for a moment, that look that always left me speechless was back. It never goes away, he agreed. I also never managed to forget you. The conversation flowed more naturally from there. We were like kids rediscovering a lost toy. Each story, each laugh bringing us closer. I talked about my life, how I had changed, and he did the same. It was as if time hadn't passed, as if those years of separation were just a pause. Do you remember that time we tried to cook together and almost burned the kitchen down? He asked, laughing. How could I forget? And yet you insisted you were a great cook. I laughed, imagining the chaos we had. I guess you never learned to use the stove, right? Of course not. The kitchen is still forbidden territory for me, he replied with a charming smile. But I always thought about what it would be like if we had tried again. What if we had stayed together? My hands trembled, and the question caught me off guard. I thought about that too, Jake. About what we could have been. But it's complicated, isn't it? Yeah, it is, he agreed, his expression shifting to something more serious. But maybe it doesn't have to be that complicated. The words hung between us, and I realized that this meeting wasn't just about reminiscing about the past, but about the possibility of a future. The emotions I had kept bottled up for so long began to spill over, and the uncertainty that had accompanied me for years started to dissipate. You're still at that cafe, right? The same one where it all began? He asked, his gaze fixed on me. Yeah, I'm still there, I replied, feeling my heart race. I guess I always will be in some way. Maybe we should go back there one day, he suggested, his smile lighting up the room, to reminisce, but also to see where we are now. I smiled, feeling a wave of hope. I'd love that. And there, in that room full of memories, I realized that maybe the past wasn't so far away after all. The lights of the cafe danced softly, reflecting in the fogged windows from the light rain falling outside. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the sweet aroma of freshly baked cakes, creating a cozy atmosphere that seemed to embrace me. I was sitting at a table in the corner, watching people pass by, lost in their own worlds, while the music played in the background. And then the melody began to resonate in my heart, like a wave bringing forth buried memories of a time when everything seemed simpler. It was Perfect by Ed Sheeran. The lyrics flowed like a river, flooding my mind with memories of Jake. The way he smiled, as if every joke he told was the funniest in the universe, and the sparkle in his eyes when we talked about the future. I remembered the first time we danced together, under the stars in the park, with the moon as our only witness. In that moment, everything felt possible. The cafe was crowded, but I was isolated in my own bubble of nostalgia. I stood up and, without a second thought, left my half-finished drink on the table, my heart racing at the decision I was about to make. I needed to revisit the places we shared. The first stop was the park. The rain lightened as I arrived at the park. The leaves on the trees were shining, as if polished by an invisible artist. I walked along the path, remembering our walks hand in hand, how he always made me laugh when he tried to imitate the birds. The park was emptier than I remembered, but the sound of the birds still filled the air. Do you remember when we came here for the first time? I murmured to myself, looking at the bench where we used to sit. It was as if Jake's memory was there, hovering among the trees, waiting for me. Clara? The familiar voice made me turn quickly. It was Sophia, my best friend. What are you doing here alone? Hi, Sophie, I replied, trying to hide my surprise. I was just thinking or reminiscing. She came closer, noticing the melancholy in my eyes. Are you okay? I am. I lied, but it was a lie that sounded fragile. I just heard a song, and it made me nostalgic. I needed to come here. Sophia looked at me with a mix of concern and understanding. Jake, right? Yeah, I replied, feeling a pang in my chest. I don't know, Sophie. I feel like I need to understand what happened between us. You never got over it, did you? Your relationship was intense. She sat down next to me on the bench, and I knew she was right. If you feel like you need closure, maybe it's time to face it. Do you think I should reach out to him? I asked, hesitant. You probably moved on. That doesn't mean you can't try. Sometimes you have to confront the past to truly move on. Those words resonated within me. I knew Sophia was right. What I feared wasn't just the meeting, but what it could awaken inside me. What if I saw Jake and all the feelings came rushing back? What if I realized I still loved him? Do you remember our first dance here? Under the stars? I asked, changing the subject, but the memory made me smile. Sure. You were so nervous, and he tried to make you laugh by doing the robot dance. Sophia laughed, and I couldn't help but laugh too. It was hilarious. Yeah, I smiled, but soon felt the weight of nostalgia. Everything was so perfect. Perfect until it wasn't anymore, she said with a serious tone, and I knew she was right. But that doesn't mean you can't have a new kind of perfection now. You're right, I murmured, looking up at the cloudy sky. What do I really want? Do I want to relive the past or find a way to move forward? Maybe you don't have to choose, she suggested. Maybe both things can coexist. After a moment of silence, I took a deep breath. What if I try to find him? What if he doesn't want to see me? Then you'll have your answer. And that's better than living in doubt, Sophia said, holding my hand. You're strong, Clara. Don't be afraid of what might happen. Those words gave me courage. I decided that, yes, I would look for Jake. But first, I needed a moment alone to think. I thanked Sophia for the chat and said goodbye, promising myself I would face whatever came my way. I left the park and headed toward one of our favorite spots, an ice cream shop that served the best flavors in town. As I walked, the sweet smell of ice cream mixed with the fresh air. Upon entering, the jingle of the bells on the door brought a wave of memories. I could almost hear Jake making a joke about how I could never choose a flavor. Hi, what would you like today? The server asked me with a smile. A strawberry ice cream, please, I replied, trying not to think about Jake. But as soon as the ice cream was served, the memory of him became impossible to ignore. I sat at a table by the window, watching people pass by. The ice cream melted slowly, but I didn't care. My thoughts were on Jake and the memories we had built together. Clara? A familiar voice pulled me from my trance. It was Jake. My heart raced. He was there, right in front of me, as real as in my memories. Jake, I said, trying to stay calm. Hi. He replied, a shy smile appearing on his lips. What are you doing here? I came to reminisce a bit. I explained, feeling nervous. And you? I just was passing by. I've always liked this place, he said, looking around. Do you still like strawberry? Yeah, I answered, an involuntary smile appearing. And you? Chocolate, as always, he said, looking at my ice cream. I remember how you always said it was the best combination. It is, I laughed, but the nostalgia began to tighten my heart again. It's funny how some things never change. He nodded, a comfortable silence settling between us. I wanted to ask so many things, but the words felt stuck in my throat. I was so close to him, and yet so far away. Clara, he broke the silence, his gaze serious. I've always thought about you. My hands trembled, but I knew I needed to be brave. I have too, Jake. I have too. The song echoed softly through the cafe, its notes floating in the air like leaves in the wind. I was sitting at a small table, watching people pass by the foggy window. But the truth was that only one person occupied my thoughts, Jake. The melody instantly transported me back to those sunny days when the world seemed full of possibilities. I remembered the gentle touch of his hand, the way he smiled, tilting his head to the side, and how life felt more vibrant by his side. After finishing my coffee, I decided that I couldn't keep living just on memories. It was time to revisit the places that had been marked by his presence. The first place that came to mind was the park where we used to meet. With a deep sigh, I grabbed my bag and headed out of the cafe. The fresh air of Chicago enveloped me, and a wave of nostalgia hit me as soon as I stepped onto the sidewalk. When I arrived at the park, I smelled the freshly cut grass mixed with the sweet aroma of flowers. The sun was shining, and the sky was clear, blue like Jake's eyes. I walked along the paths we used to take together, each step awakening a new memory. I remembered the afternoons we would sit under that huge tree, the shade protecting us from the heat. "This place is magical, isn't it?" he used to say, looking at me with a smile that lit up his face. "It's even more magical with you here," I would reply, feeling my heart race. Those moments were pure, filled with laughter and promises. As I walked, I spotted a bench where we had had a picnic. I remembered how Jake brought homemade sandwiches and lemonade, and how we had fun trying to remember the lyrics to a song he loved. I sat on the bench, and the feeling of the cold metal beneath me brought a strange mix of comfort and pain. I closed my eyes and let the memory envelop me. "Clara?" A familiar voice pulled me from my trance. I opened my eyes and found a tall, lean figure in front of me. It was Lucas, an old friend of Jake's, whom I hadn't seen in years. "Are you okay? It's been a while since I've seen you around here." "Hi, Lucas. I'm okay," I replied, trying to hide the emotion that still lingered over me. "I'm just revisiting some memories." He sat down next to me, observing the park in comfortable silence. "Jake always talked about you. He remembered every detail. He knew you were special." That sentence hit me like an arrow. "Have you seen him recently?" I needed to know, but the fear of hearing something I didn't want made me hesitate. "Actually, no. He's been a bit distant," Lucas replied, his gaze lost in the horizon. "But I always thought you two still had something." "I thought so too," I murmured, more to myself than to him. But time and life took us in different directions. Lucas turned to me, his eyes reflecting a deep understanding. "Sometimes the past doesn't let us go so easily, Clara. Do you still feel something for him?" "I do," I confessed, the truth spilling out of me like a whisper. "But I don't know if that's enough to start over. What happened between us was so intense, so perfect until it wasn't, right?" Lucas said, and I could see the pain in his eyes. "But what do you want now? What does your heart desire?" I took a deep breath, pondering. What did I really want? What did my heart desire? The answer seemed so clear, yet so distant at the same time. I want to understand. I want to know if there's still something between us, if we still have a chance. Lucas nodded slowly. "Then you need to talk to him. Don't let fear or doubt hold you back. Sometimes life gives us second chances, but we need to be willing to seize them. His words resonated with me. Second chances. That idea inspired and terrified me at the same time. You're right, Lucas. I can't keep living in the past, but I also can't ignore what I feel. I need to find Jake. If you need support, I'll be here, Lucas said, standing up. Sometimes a friend is all we need to take the first step. I thanked him, and as he walked away, a new determination began to blossom inside me. I got up and decided it was time to go to the place where it all began, the cafe where we had first met. I walked through the streets of Chicago, the cool wind tousling my hair, but the feeling of freedom was palpable. Each corner I turned, each step I took, seemed to bring me closer to the truth I needed to face. When I finally arrived at the cafe, my heart raced. The small glass door felt like a portal to a world I had left behind. I entered, and the familiar smell of fresh coffee and freshly baked pastries enveloped me. The place was full of people, but everything seemed blurred as I searched for Jake. I sat at a table by the window, the anticipation pulsing within me. I had decided that I wouldn't leave until I spoke to him. Time passed and anxiety grew. I looked at the clock repeatedly, each second dragging on like an eternity. What would I say to him? How would I start this conversation? The questions hammered in my mind, but the answer was simple. I needed to be honest. As I waited, my mind wandered to the moments when Jake and I were together. The way he made me laugh, how his eyes sparkled when he told me about his dreams. I remembered a conversation we had about the future. Clara, do you believe we can have our own dreams and still be together? He had asked, the seriousness in his voice catching me off guard. I believe we can, Jake. If we're honest with each other, I had replied, filled with hope. Now, that same honesty was calling me. I needed to talk to him. I needed to hear his voice and understand if what we felt still existed. Finally, when the door opened again, my heart almost leaped out of my chest. Jake walked in, his gaze immediately locking onto mine. He looked different, yet at the same time, so familiar. That same sparkle in his eyes, that same presence that always made me feel at home. Clara, he said hesitantly, as if he didn't know what to say. Hi, Jake, I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. I needed to see you. He approached, and the tension in the air was palpable. The world around us faded away, and all I could see was him. What happened? You seemed so distant. I was trying to understand everything, I confessed, my voice trembling. About us, about what happened. I can't just leave everything behind. Jake sat down across from me, and for a moment, the silence spoke more than our words. I knew the conversation that was about to begin would change everything. And deep down, I was ready for it. The cafe lights flickered gently, as if dancing to the rhythm of the melody echoing in my ears. I was sitting at a small table, a steaming cup of coffee between my hands when the song started to play. It was Wonderwall by the band Oasis. The sound of the guitar enveloped me like a warm, nostalgic hug, bringing to the surface memories I had kept but never forgotten. Jake! His name settled in my mind like a gentle breeze caressing my face. I remembered the way he smiled, as if each laugh was an invitation to a world full of possibilities. I also recalled the first time we heard that song together, on a sunny afternoon in the park, as the wind played with our hair, and he looked at me with a sparkle in his eyes that made my heart race. The cafe was crowded, but I felt completely alone, lost in a whirlwind of memories. I decided I needed to do something. I abruptly got up, leaving the almost full cup behind. I walked through the streets of Chicago, each step bringing me closer to the past I was trying so hard to understand. The city was full of life, but I felt like a ghost, drifting through a world that was no longer mine. I arrived at the park where we used to meet. The same tree that witnessed our promises was still there, its leaves swaying gently in the wind, as if they wanted to call me. I sat on one of the benches, my heart racing, and closed my eyes for a moment. The smell of wet grass and flowers awakened a wave of longing within me. Clara? A familiar voice cut through the silence, and when I opened my eyes, I saw Jake standing in front of me. He looked older, but the smile was still the same. My heart raced, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Jake, I managed to murmur, surprised and a little hesitant. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same, he replied, looking around. But it seems the city still has its traps, doesn't it? I smiled, the feeling of nostalgia intensifying. Yes, it seems some things never change. He sat down next to me, and for a moment, the conversation flowed naturally, as if time had never passed. Do you remember that time we stayed here until sunset trying to guess the color of the clouds? He asked, his eyes shining with the memory. Of course I remember. You bet it would be pink, and I said it would be orange. In the end, it was a mix of both, and we both lost the bet. I laughed, recalling the way he had pouted, indignant. Oh, how I loved those moments, he said, looking at the horizon. It was like nothing else mattered, just the two of us and the world around us. Silence settled between us, and I realized there was so much left unsaid. Are you okay, Jake? I asked, breaking the tension. How has your life been? He hesitated before answering. It's been complicated. After you moved away, things changed a lot. I missed you, Clara, more than I'd like to admit. His words echoed within me like a distant echo. I missed you too. Life without you was different. I tried to move on, but there was always this part of me that wanted to go back. And why didn't you come back? His gaze was intense, almost challenging, because I didn't know if he still wanted me around. I confessed, feeling vulnerability wash over me. I was afraid that everything we had would have been lost in time. He turned to me, his gaze piercing. Clara, I never stopped thinking about you. Never. The truth is that time may pass, but some things remain. And you are one of those things. His words hit me like a wave. The weight of longing and pain transformed into something lighter, almost hopeful. Jake, I don't know what this means for us right now. Life has moved on in ways I could never have imagined. He took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. I don't know either, but I would like to try to figure out what still exists between us. The air between us was charged with possibilities, and I felt that while there was a weight from the past, there was also a new chance forming. What if we started with a coffee, like the old times? I suggested, an involuntary smile forming on my lips. A coffee would be perfect, he replied, the excitement in his voice contagious. But only if you promise not to let time pass again without telling me what you're thinking. Deal, I said, laughing. But you also need to promise me the same thing. He nodded, a wide smile lighting up his face. It's a deal. We got up together, our steps synchronized as we walked toward the cafe I had left behind. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light around us, and I couldn't help but feel that this was the beginning of something new. The past hadn't disappeared, but now it was just a part of our story, a bridge leading us to a future we had yet to explore. As we entered the cafe, the music was still playing, and the familiarity of the place seemed to envelop us. We ordered our coffees and found a cozy corner where the low lights created an intimate atmosphere. So, what have you been up to since you moved? Jake asked, holding his cup with both hands, as if seeking warmth. Well, I graduated, got a job at a marketing firm. It's been challenging, but something I really enjoy, I replied, trying to keep the conversation light. That's amazing, Clara. I always knew you would go far. And what about you? What have you been doing with your life? He hesitated for a moment. I'm working at a design studio. It's always been my passion, but I wasn't sure if I could make a living from it. Life is strange, isn't it? Sometimes the things we want most feel so distant. Yeah, and sometimes what we need is right in front of us, but we can't see it, I said, my gaze fixed on his eyes. He smiled, and in that moment, I realized that the connection between us was strong, maybe stronger than I had imagined. The conversations flowed, and the sense of lightness that once felt so far away now filled the air around us. Clara, he began, his expression shifting to something more serious. I don't want this to end again. I want both of us to have a chance to discover who we are now, together. I want that too, Jake. I admitted, the sincerity in my voice. But what if it doesn't work out? What if all of this is just an illusion? Then we try again. Life is made of trials and errors, and what matters is that we're here now. And so, as the cafe around us continued to buzz with laughter and conversations, I realized I was ready for this new journey. The soft light of the cafe illuminated my face as I sat, lost in my thoughts. The aroma of fresh coffee and the sound of laughter in the background created an atmosphere that was, in a way, comforting, but also carried a weight I couldn't ignore. The gentle melody coming from the speakers caught me by surprise. It was the same song we used to listen to together, Jake and I. A lump formed in my throat, and for a brief moment, I was transported back to our past. I looked out the window at the busy street. People passed by, each with their own story, as I wondered where exactly my story had gone off course. Do you remember the first time we came here? Jake's voice echoed in my mind. He was always so excited, his smile lighting up the room, as if the sun was always present when he was around. I stood up, unable to stay seated, and decided I needed to revisit the places that once were ours. I collected my coat and stepped out of the cafe, feeling the cold Chicago wind wrap around me. Memories came to me in flashes. The laughter, the deep conversations, and the moments of comfortable silence. My first destination was the park where we used to walk. I remembered how Jake loved to have picnics under the trees. The smell of freshly cut grass and the chirping of birds welcomed me. I sat on a bench and closed my eyes, trying to relive those moments. The feeling of the sun warming my face made me smile, and I could almost hear his laughter. Clara, I heard him say, if you could go anywhere right now, where would you go? Wherever you are, I replied with a playful smile. That was our typical conversation, full of dreams and promises. But now everything felt distant, like a movie I had watched a long time ago. The park was full of life, but I felt alone. I got up and walked among the trees, heading towards the small lake we always visited. I sat by the water's edge, watching the small waves form with the wind. Time seemed to have stopped there. The water reflected the blue sky, and I remembered a particular day when Jake surprised me with a boat ride. You'll see, Clara, it's like floating among dreams, he had said, his eyes shining with excitement. I hope you don't make me fall in the water, I joked, but the truth was I was anxious. The boat swayed gently as he rowed, and I remembered the way he looked at me, as if I were the only being in the universe. Look, the sky. It's as beautiful as you, he had said, making me blush. I never knew how he managed to do that, turning a simple afternoon into an unforgettable memory. The memory made me smile, but at the same time, a tightness in my heart reminded me that those memories were in the past. Life had moved on, but I was still stuck. I abruptly stood up, determined to go to our favorite cafe, where we had sat so many times to discuss the future and share our dreams. When I arrived, the atmosphere was bustling, but there was still an empty spot at the table we used to occupy. I sat down and ordered a coffee. The waiter, who recognized me, smiled. "You're still coming here, Clara. How are you?" "I'm good, thanks." "Just revisiting old memories," I replied, trying to keep a light tone. "Ah, young love." He laughed, as if he understood what I was going through. "It's always nice to reminisce, isn't it?" "Yes, definitely," I murmured, looking out the window where the sunlight filtered through the leaves of the trees. It was comforting, yet at the same time, painful. Every corner of that place held a story, a laugh, a shared glance. While I waited for my coffee, a group of friends walked in and sat at the table next to mine. Their laughter echoed, and I couldn't help but smile at a joke that reminded me of Jake. "Remember that time you tried to cook and almost burned the whole house down?" I almost laughed out loud, but the sadness quickly took over. The waiter brought my coffee, and I thanked him, trying to focus on the taste of the warm liquid. "Sometimes memories can be a burden," I said aloud, more to myself than to him. "But they can also be a gift," he replied with an understanding look. "Memory is what keeps us alive, Clara. Never forget that." He was right. The memories of Jake were a part of me, and I needed to learn to live with them, not as a weight, but as a chapter of my life. I didn't want the pain to define me. I wanted the memories to inspire me to move forward. Suddenly, my phone vibrated on the table. It was a message from my friend Anna. "Hi, how are you? Want to meet up later?" An invitation that made me hesitate. I wanted to be with friends, but I couldn't get Jake out of my mind. What I really wished for was a conversation with him, a chance to start over. "Today is a beautiful day to remember the past," I murmured to myself, looking out the window again. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, and somehow it brought me a little peace. I got up, paid the bill, and left the cafe. The cool afternoon breeze brushed against my face, and I decided I could no longer run from my memories. They were a part of me, and I needed to accept them. I walked through the streets of Chicago, feeling a bit lighter, as if I were shedding the weight I had been carrying. As I walked, thoughts about the future began to surface. What did I really want? Would it be possible to find new love while still holding a special place for Jake in my heart? The questions danced in my mind, but I knew I needed time to find the answers. Suddenly, an idea struck me. What if I tried to reach out to Jake? Did he still live in the same city? My heart raced at the possibility. What would I say to him? "Hi, it's me, Clara. Do you remember me?" But at the same time, insecurity washed over me. What if he didn't want to see me? What if the memories were just that, memories that were meant to stay in the past? As I walked, the sun was setting, and I realized that life was a series of cycles. The day was coming to an end, but that didn't mean the sun wouldn't shine again the next day. I had to believe that I could start over, that I could create new memories, even if it meant facing the past. And so, with determination growing inside me, I decided I would return to the cafe, to the park, to every place that had been special for us. I didn't want to forget, but I wanted to learn to live with the memories. After all, life goes on, and I was ready to move forward. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the subtle hint of cinnamon coming from the pastry display. Soft music played in the background, but I couldn't focus on it. My thoughts were far away, traveling back to a past I thought I had left behind. The song echoing through the cafe was the same one that played on our first date, and within seconds, Jake's image formed in my mind, clear as if he were sitting right in front of me. It was a sunny day, and I remembered the way he smiled, as if the whole world had stopped for us. "Do you like coffee?" he asked, those blue eyes sparkling. I had nodded, nervous, and he laughed, a sound that still echoed within me. "Then let's do this right. A cappuccino, please." And that's how our story began, filled with laughter and long conversations about dreams and plans. I got up from the table, my heart racing, and left the cafe, heading toward the park where we used to stroll. With each step, more memories resurfaced. I could see Jake running toward the lake, trying to surprise me with a pedal boat. "Come on, Clara. It's just a ride." He pulled me by the hand, and I couldn't stop laughing as he tried, unsuccessfully, to steer the boat in the right direction. The feeling of freedom and happiness seemed so distant now, like a faded photograph. I arrived at the park and took a deep breath, the smell of freshly cut grass mixing with the fragrances of blooming flowers. I sat on one of the benches, watching children play and couples share tender moments. Time seemed to stand still there, but I knew I couldn't do the same. The past was a weight I carried, and the music still resonated in my mind, as if Jake was calling me back. "Hi, Clara." A familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. I looked up and saw Sarah, my longtime friend, approaching with a smile. "What are you doing here alone?" "Just revisiting some memories," I replied, trying to hide the melancholy in my voice. She sat down next to me, a curious look on her face. "Memories of who?" "You seem distant." "Jake," I murmured, not thinking twice. The song that played at the cafe, I didn't expect it to affect me so much. Sarah frowned, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Do you still think about him? After everything that happened?" "Sometimes, yes. It's strange. I thought I had moved on, but hearing that song brought it all back. Our laughter, the places we went, it's like I was reliving it all over again." "You need to talk to him," Sarah suggested, concern evident in her tone. "If this is affecting you so much, maybe it's time to understand what really happened." "I don't know if I'm ready for that," I confessed, looking at the lake. The water reflected the blue sky, but my heart was filled with clouds. What if he's already moved on? What if I'm just a distant memory? But what if he's thinking of you too? "Sometimes things aren't as they seem," she replied, taking my hand. "You won't know until you try." "You're right," I said, feeling a wave of courage mixed with fear. "I need to confront this once and for all." "I think you should. It's not fair to yourself to live like this, clinging to the past." "You deserve to know the truth," Sarah affirmed, squeezing my hand. "And if you need support, I'll be here." Those words brought a momentary relief, but also a weight. I knew the decision was in my hands, and the future I feared was closer than ever. The idea of finding Jake filled me with a mix of anxiety and hope, and the responsibility of facing my feelings felt overwhelming. After a while, I stood up from the bench, determined. "I'm going to do this," I declared, looking at Sarah. "I'm going to find him." "Great. When are you thinking of going?" she asked, excited. "Maybe tomorrow. I don't want to put this off," I replied, already imagining what that meeting would be like. What would I say? How would he react? My heart raced just thinking about it. "I'll go with you if you want," Sarah offered, with an encouraging smile. "You don't have to go through this alone." "Thanks, but I think I need to do this by myself. It's a conversation I need to have with him, and I don't want you to just be a spectator," I explained, although the idea of having her presence was comforting. "I think this is part of my healing process." "I understand, but know that I'll be rooting for you," Sarah said, standing up. "Let me know how it goes later, okay?" I nodded, watching her walk away. The park was calm, and the flowers swayed gently in the breeze. I needed a moment to breathe, to organize my thoughts. I walked to the lake, sitting again on a bench by the water. I closed my eyes and let the memories flow. The sound of Jake's laughter, the shared glances, the unspoken promises. Did I still love him? That was the question that haunted me. The music still echoed in my mind, and I knew I couldn't escape it for much longer. The day passed slowly, and I felt the mounting pressure of the decision I needed to make. I looked up at the sky, where some clouds began to form. It was time to face the storm within me. By late afternoon, I returned home, my heart heavy but determination pulsing within me. I had a mission: to understand what still bound me to Jake and, perhaps, to find the peace I so desperately desired. The decision was made, and the journey toward reconciliation had begun. I was sitting at a table in the cafe I always frequented, the smell of fresh coffee wrapping around me like a tight hug. The walls decorated with old photos and the soft murmur of conversations around me created a cozy atmosphere. But at that moment, all I could think about was Jake. The music playing in the background, a ballad he used to sing to me on cold nights, seemed to echo through time, pulling me back to a past I had tried to bury. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, allowing the memories to wash over me. It was as if I could feel his presence right there beside me, his hand holding mine as he looked at me with that smile that always made my heart race. And suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. I remembered the first time we met, how our eyes locked and how the world around us seemed to disappear. I decided I needed to revisit the places we had gone together. I stood up from the table, leaving a generous tip for the waitress, and headed toward the park where we used to spend hours talking and laughing. The sky was blue, and the sun shone brightly, but I still felt a chill run down my spine, a mix of nostalgia and longing. Upon arriving at the park, I found a bench that seemed made for us. I sat down and closed my eyes again, recalling the sunny afternoons we spent there. Clara, Jake's voice resonated in my mind. I could see him just as he was, with his wind-tousled hair and that mischievous look. Do you remember the day we decided to have a picnic here? I brought a horrible tuna sandwich, and you almost gave up on me because of it. How could I forget? I laughed to myself, looking around as if you were right there. You probably still think you're a chef. The memory brought a mix of joy and sadness. I wished he were here. I wanted to ask him if he remembered those moments too, if he missed them as much as I did. I stood up from the bench, determined to continue my walk. I walked to the bookstore where we used to spend our afternoons, browsing books and discussing the stories that fascinated us. As soon as I entered, the smell of paper and ink enveloped me, and a wave of memories hit me. I found a corner where we used to sit, surrounded by piles of books. I felt an overwhelming urge to pick up a book and reread our notes, but I hesitated. The past still hurt, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to relive those moments. Hey, Clara, what a surprise to see you here. A familiar voice pulled me from my thoughts. It was Anna, a longtime friend who was also an avid reader. Hey, Anna. I smiled, trying to hide the confusion I felt. I was just looking at books. Oh, books always have a way of calling to us, don't they? I was just thinking about you recently. How are you? I'm good, actually. Just revisiting some places. I didn't want to go into detail, but Anna's curiosity was evident. Jake? She asked bluntly. The simple name made my heart tighten. Yes, I just remembered some things. The truth was that I still carried the pain of the breakup, and every place reminded me of him in a unique way. You still love him, don't you? Anna said with an understanding look. I didn't know how to respond. What I felt wasn't just love. It was a complex mix of longing, regret, and hope. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice in ending everything. My words came out faster than I expected, and I could see the surprise on Anna's face. Clara, you need to allow yourself to feel this. Life is too short to live with regrets. You still have time to rewrite your story. I took a deep breath, pondering her words. What did I really want? I was interrupted by a message on my phone. It was a notification for a new song by Jake. My heart raced. Had he released a song? I looked at Anna, who smiled encouragingly. Go ahead, listen. It might be a sign. I sat down in one of the bookstore's armchairs and clicked the link. The soft melody enveloped me, and the lyrics spoke of love and regret. The words were like an echo of my own story, and I couldn't hold back the tears. The song ended, but I was still lost in my thoughts. Do you want to talk about it? Anna asked, now sitting next to me. Tears streamed down my face, and I didn't know how to explain the whirlwind of emotions I was feeling. It's like I'm stuck in a cycle. I loved him so much, and even after everything, I feel like he's still a part of me. My voice trembled. It's hard to let go. Clara, you need to ask yourself if you still want to fight for this. If you feel there's still something between you, maybe it's time to take the next step. I wasn't sure if I was ready for this, but at the same time, the idea of continuing to live with this longing felt unbearable. I looked at Anna, who encouraged me with her eyes. You're right. I need to talk to him. I need to know how he feels. Determination began to take over me. Do it, Clara. Go after what makes you happy. Life is about choices, and you have the power to change your destiny. I left the bookstore with a new sense of purpose. The sun was still shining, but now there was a spark of hope inside me. I walked toward the place where Jake used to play guitar on summer nights. The spot was empty, but the memory of him there, singing to me, was so vivid that I could almost hear him. With my heart racing, I took out my phone and searched for his number. The ringing seemed to echo in the silence around me. Finally, someone answered. Hello? His voice made my stomach drop. Jake, it's me, Clara. The longing and insecurity were present in every syllable. Clara, it's been so long. How are you? The surprise in his voice was palpable, and that gave me courage. I'm well. Actually, I'm here at the park where we used to meet, and I was thinking about you. I've been thinking about us too. Would you like to meet up? That question filled me with a mix of relief and nervousness. Yes, I would love to. Can we meet at the cafe we always went to? Of course. I'm heading there now. The conversation ended, and I felt as if I had lifted a weight off my shoulders. The possibility of a fresh start was real, and I was ready to face whatever came next.